What's up, guys? Coming back with another video on the topics from earlier this week. First one was on sleep and how to correct some sleep issues and just common things that cause sleep problems, sleep quality, lack of sleep, and so on and so forth. This one, I'm going to talk about. Well, basically adherence, but a little more specific. Two things really. Training with varying schedules, like your work schedule varies, for example, and same with meals. Meal consistency with maybe with schedules that you're either A, really busy, or B, vary a lot, or they perhaps you have like long gaps where you can't eat because of whatever your job is. So things along those lines. There's some things that you can definitely do to make your life a lot easier and more consistent. So with that, the first one, training. So with training, for a lot of people, that would be in a situation where maybe their schedule just isn't consistent week to week. Let's say, like for example, one person asks, let's see. They ask about getting all their training sessions in because work, job hours, and location change frequently. And there was a similar question about that as well. But with that, one thing that you can do is work on a training rotation. So let's say that instead of on Monday I train, legs, and Tuesday I train back, and Wednesday and so on. Actually just work on a rotating split. That's actually how I like to do a lot of training splits with clients, regardless of how many days they're training. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5, maybe it's even 6. Instead of we're doing 2 on and 2 off, or 2 on 1 off, 2 on 2 off, or anything like that. We're going to do, this is how many days that you're going to train throughout the week. You can train on whatever days you want to train, depending on your schedule, depending on your recovery. So those two things really are going to be the main determinants there. That's kind of how I like to look at it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same week to week that way. For a lot of people, yeah, it's probably going to be relatively close, but for some people, it's not. Some people, they might have 2 days off in a row, or they might have 3 days off in a row and have to train 4 days in a row. While that might not necessarily be ideal from a recovery standpoint, it still allows them to adhere to the plan, and and that's the biggest thing for them physically and mentally, is that they're able to adhere to the plan and still get about the same work done in the 7-day rotation. And we could even work on a longer rotation if we needed to. And there might even be times where I don't work on a rotation at all. It's like, you have your training, here's your 5 primary training days, they all go in order. Make sure you follow them in order, but if you have to put an extra off day in there, it's okay, as long as your next training day, you pick up the next day on the cycle, for example. So that way, one week you might only train 4 days, another week you might train 5 days. Again, that makes it a little hard to equate volume and adjust things in that regard, but it's still, we can adjust nutrition, so the nutrition's matching the output calorically and whether or not you're training. And it's allowing them to adhere to some structure, follow a rotation, make sure their recovery is good. So you can do that with training. Again, like I said, I don't like to set, you train this on this day, or you train so many days on, so many days off. That's really cool if you can do it that way. But in real life, it just doesn't always work that way for everyone. So something to keep in mind. Also, and then with meals, frequency is probably the biggest thing with people. They just use a frequency that's not going to work for them with their job. If you are somebody that has really long gaps in between meals because of your job situation, it's just not. It's not really practical for you to eat 7 meals a day, or even 6 meals a day. You might have to eat 5. You might have to eat 4. You might have to go lower. You might have to do intermittent fasting. You might have to do some kind of other fasting protocol. You might have to push all the meals into different eating windows. Like if we're still looking at the day as a whole calorically, or in your macronutrients, and we're trying to time things the best way possible around training, for nutrient partitioning, but at the same time, getting everything in is obviously number one. So if that means that you need to eat less meals in a day, then eat less meals. I just don't find that, for example, I have a nurse that works 12-hour shifts, and they're an ER nurse where, it's hectic, it's crazy. They're not going to be able to eat. They're not going to be able to stop every 2 hours and eat. It just doesn't work that way. And I mean, most people at this point know that you don't necessarily have to eat every 2 hours to maximize, muscle protein synthesis, and you're not going to go catabolic. It's not going to help your metabolism. So we pretty much have debunked all of those things. But at the same time, I think some people are still afraid to back down meal frequency, even though it might be more convenient. Your hunger patterns will adapt to meal frequency. Your hormones, your ghrelin levels, and all that's your circadian, the circadian rhythm in terms of when the ghrelin spikes and peaks and valleys is going to adapt. So you will get used to lower meal frequency, and you may be hungry at times because you have to go. There are times where you would normally eat and you don't get to. Maybe you have to double up a meal later. But you're still getting it in, is my point. You're still getting it in by the end of the day. So from a body composition standpoint, it's really, it's very subtle difference. You're losing that couple percent, yes, but you're gaining the other 98% because you're not missing meals. And that's the biggest thing. You're able to control the caloric and macro environment because you've lowered your meal frequency. So that's probably what I would suggest in terms of that. Also another thing too is with the training that I should have mentioned too is just planning training days around work days as well. So it comes to mind because I did a consultation recently with somebody that was an EMT, and I guess that would be the proper term for it. But anyhow, EMT, nurse, or any doctor, basically anyone that works long shifts on and then has longer periods off, you can periodize your training in accordance to that. So if you have if you're working 12 hours, a 12-hour shift, and then you have 2 days off, well, why would you want to cram your training session in the day you have a 12-hour shift? That doesn't make any sense. So, don't stress about having to do that. That's completely, it's not really going to be helpful at the end of the, end of the day. So, periodizing training in accordance to that. So this guy in particular he's firefighter, I believe, actually was the job. So they have equipment at the station, right? So the way I suggested laying it out was actually train the day that he's there for 24 hours, right? So he's there for 24 and it's off for basically like two days or something, 2-3 days. Because it's 24 hours, like 3 8-hour shifts. But anyhow, would train once while there, and then the first day off of work was completely off to recover because sleep cycle is a little wonky. Second day off of work, train. Again, so I think it was 1 day on, 2 days off, maybe was what it was. And then, so there you go. So basically the day before you go back, you train. The day that you're there, you train. The day after you're off, you don't train. So it's 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. Granted, it gets busy. They can get a call, but probably going to have time to train somewhere in that 24-hour span. So, and then again, set up your eating in accordance to caloric expenditure around the training. Higher on the days you train, lower on the days you don't, perhaps, depending on your goal. So those are some things you can do in terms of training and in terms of meals. Now, there was one more little side question on the meals. Preparation-wise, obviously preparing things ahead of time. Little things that people don't think about too. If you are someone that uses a macro plan, do not try to calculate your macros as the day goes on. Yes, you can use your own foods or whatever, depending on what you have set up for yourself or with your coach, but don't try to just plug it in as the day goes on. You're going to get caught in weird situations. You can always fill it in at the end of the day, yes, but you're going to have funky, it's not going to end up being timed very well. You're going to have like weird macro combinations at the end of the day. You're going to have a hard time plugging it in. It's going to be stressful. So just lay it out before the day starts. If you get caught and can't eat, double up a meal later, if that's what you have to do. With that too, always having food with you. If you think, if you're someone that gets caught at work because somebody calls off and you have to stay late, always expect it. Always. If that means you're taking 3 extra meals and you put them back in the fridge when you get home because you didn't have to stay, who cares? Doesn't matter. Always have them prepared. Always have them prepared the day before you go to work if you think it's going to be long. So anything like that, just always be prepared ahead of time. Don't be afraid to eat your food cold. Like whatever you got to do. I mean, there are obviously sacrifices there, but it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. And then too, if it is a timing situation where you have to get meals down quick, pick the right foods. So food selection and meal frequency are going to kind of go hand in hand. You're not going to sit there, if you have 2 minutes to eat, you're not going to sit there and cut up a steak and baked potato. Probably not going to be ideal. Probably going to need some kind of powder with with whatever added to it to meet your macro requirements. So those are just some really simple things. Probably nothing real groundbreaking for anyone, but hopefully it helps a few people out. And on the next video, on the next one, probably talk a little bit about body image. There was a couple questions in terms of like letting body fat creep up enough to actually put themselves in a good environment to gain muscle mass. They're having a hard time letting their body fat creep up to allow health, recovery in terms of health and eating enough to grow. So I might cover that one next and talk to you guys soon.